Good afternoon, and welcome to Ask a Librarian Live. My name is Neil Stokes. I am a librarian with the Los Angeles Public Library's digital content team. Thanks for joining us. This is a weekly stream where we talk to librarians throughout the Los Angeles Public Library system about what they're working on, and we explore some of our digital collections and talk about some of the resources that we offer, even during a time when our physical libraries are shuttered. And today I am joined by Christina Rice. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm here. I'm here in my house where I've been.
Christina is the senior librarian of the Los Angeles Public Library's photo collection. Have I got that right? Oh, maybe we lost Christina's audio. Says we've got.
There we go. Oh. So is 30 seconds in for technical failure a record for these?
No, I think we've done far worse.
Okay, if you could repeat your question, please.
Yeah, no worries. I was just you are the senior librarian of the photo collection. That's your title, right?
That is my title for the last 11 years now.
Oh wow! And can you maybe tell us a little bit about your work in that capacity, and kind of how it is normally and how that's changed during this current situation with the pandemic?
Yeah, so the library does have a historic photo collection of, we estimate, I think 3.6 million is the number we've bantered around for years. I think we maybe are approaching 4 at this point. And so when I'm physically in the building, a lot of what I do is, working with the physical collection, doing searches for people, doing programming at the library, curating exhibitions. And so, all of that obviously has gone away for right now, but a huge focus of our operation is getting photos online. And so that's something that we've, been able to continue to do. We fortunately had a really large backlog of, I think, like over 20,000 photos that had been scanned that were awaiting metadata or cataloging to go live on Tessa. So now that I'm home, I've been prepping those photos and turning them over to our partners in the digitization department. So we're still continuing to get photos online. While we've been home, I've completely taken over the operation of photo orders. So our photos are available for reproduction and use. And these days, people usually don't order prints. They're ordering high resolution copies for uses in books and documentaries, or they're having them blown up and displayed. And so we've been able to continue that. But whereas that used to be handled by other people and other, the digitization department worked with us, I've completely taken over that. So that's actually a huge part of my day now, is processing photo orders, which initially we were just going to shut that down because we thought, who's going to be ordering photos? And it turns out lots of people. So it's really great that these projects are still going on. People are still working on books. People are still making documentaries. People are still doing environmental reports. And so that's a service that we've been able to provide. And I think we've gotten over 50 orders since we've been shut down. So yeah, we continue to plug away.
That's awesome. And so I guess a lot of people, might not realize how much the photo collection is used by these kind of creators. So you've got like you were saying, filmmakers, people with books. And can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of uses that the photo collection gets? Yeah,
I think I would say books and documentaries are probably the highest level of orders that we get, but they get used for a variety of reasons. They've been used as court evidence in the past. Retail stores order them and use them as displays. They get used as set design in television and in film and in plays. We had somebody order a photo and they blew it up as like a giant mural in the stairwell of their house. People use it sometimes for product design and for advertisements. So it really runs runs the gamut. Sometimes people will find themselves in the photo collection and they just want to get they want to order the picture of themselves. We had somebody contact us who, was at a protest at UCLA in the 80s, and, the Herald-Examiner, who we have their archive, covered it. So they have found themselves, or people have found their relatives. So that's always fun when we hear about. We had an order that came in this week, and it was a guy who found a photo. It was an old race car photo, and it had been hanging in when he was a kid, his dentist office had this photo, and he had always loved it and had been looking for years and found it in our collection. And so he ordered a high-res copy that he's going to have printed to hang up at home. And it was a photo he'd been looking at forever. So we never know how people are going to find our photos and what photos are going to speak to them, which is why we just try to digitize as much as we can. So I never feel like it's our job to consider what's interesting or what's important, because every photo tells a different story and has a different meaning for everybody.
That's so cool. It does occur to me that, so much of, especially when it comes to kind of media production, when you see commercials now, they're all like cell phone videos, and because people can't go out and shoot things, I wonder if that actually leads to, people need to get media that already exists. And I wonder if the photo collection kind of fills a gap. It's easier to edit a documentary with old photos than it is to go out and shoot an interview right now.
Yeah, I think so. And just, and there's a lot of, there does seem to be an uptick in documentaries being made about historical events as well. So there seems to be a lot more of that going on. I guess I don't know if there's more streaming distribution outlets. So the last couple of years, we've certainly seen an uptick in photos being ordered for documentaries.
Yeah. I guess, talking about this, maybe we should dig in and start taking a look at some of the collections. Do you want to, let me bring up, do you want to take a look at the stuff you've pulled up, or?
Yeah, we can. If you want to take a look, I just brought up a very small, I think we have 130,000 photos online. So I've brought up a percentage of those.
Well, here, actually, I'll put up mine, and I just wanted to show everyone Tessa. And let me see if I can just display. Yeah, there you go. So tessa.lapl.org, that's our kind of hub for all of the library's digital, historical collections, and of which the photo collection is one part. So I just wanted to show people how they could get to that. So this site contains, like I said, all our digital collections. And then there is a link right here. The first collection on the list is the photo collection. So that's basically how you would get to it. If you go to our main website too, start from there. What is the quickest way? I know we've changed things around a little bit.
It's down at the bottom.
Down at the bottom. So we've got a direct link to Tessa. So you click on Tessa, that takes you to, we probably have I think that has to do with my streaming software, not with the website. So let's just go to tessa.lapl.org. Again, that's the URL down at the bottom of the screen. And then you would just click on the photo collection. And then we've got all of these kind of sub collections. And I wonder can you just tell us generally, like, what is the photo collection? Where does it come from? Like, why is there a photo collection at the library?
Yeah, so the scope of the photo collection is very broadly life in Los Angeles. And so the collection, we do have some photos going back, all the way to the 1850s up until the present. And so we started collecting, but my understanding is we started collecting photos like in the 1940s, and the object, the goal was to have a collection that did reflect life in Los Angeles. And so our early collections were kind of what, these photos showing the early development and growth of Los Angeles. And so we've never purchased photos. So we have almost 4 million photos, and those have all come from donations over the years. And I'm not picky at all. So, when people want to donate collections to us, as long as it kind of falls in that scope, life in Los Angeles, as long as there aren't strings attached or copyright issues, we will gladly add them to the collection. And so down at the bottom of that screen are, some of the larger collections that we have. And I think it helps. You can always just dive in and start searching. Yeah. And I like to think our collection does a pretty good job of covering, all corners of this. It's a huge city. Most neighborhoods are represented, certainly some more than others. And I, truly hope that all of our different populations are also represented. And again, in some cases, some more than others, but, we do strive to fill those gaps when we can. And like I said, each collection that you're looking at here on the screen, does a very different thing. So for example, the first one there is the Herald-Examiner.
Yeah.
And that was a local newspaper. It started in the 1870s. Unfortunately, they didn't start saving photos till the mid-20s. So that collection spans from the mid-20s until 1989, when the newspaper folded. It consists of images from the Los Angeles Herald, which will be from the mid-20s to 1962, and then the Herald-Examiner. That was after the Herald and the Examiner merged in 1962, and that runs up until 1989. For those of you that are wondering, the photos from the Examiner pre-62 are over at USC, so we refer people there often. And this is, news stories. So if you can think of, major, even minor news stories, that were taking place in Los Angeles between the 1920s and 1989, that is what you're going to find in this collection. The early days, for the 20s and 30s and 40s, it really leaned, it was kind of a yellow paper. It was owned by Hearst. So the more scandalous, the better. So if you're, looking for crime and looking for scandal, the Herald's, a really good option for that. But of course, they have other things as well. And it's also our primary source of photos from the 1980s. So this collection has, a couple million photos. I think we've digitized like around 28,000. So this is the major collection that has not been digitized just because of sheer volume. But kind of, the things people are really interested in. So here we have, Kirk Gibson at the 1988 World Series. So a lot of our sports figures, and then you get into, like the Black Dahlia case and the Manson family, to like movie stars like Marilyn Monroe, kind of those heavy hitters. Those things we have digitized.
Yeah.
When we're not, when we're actually in our building, we're able to search the offline collection pretty easily. So people are always welcome to contact us to ask us to look for photos. Please don't do that now, because you're gonna get the response that we're very sorry we're not able to do that. But there's a nice representation of the Herald collection online currently.
Yeah, and once we are reopened, so that's a large number of photos that aren't actually digitized, that you just have in physical holdings. What is the number of non-digitized?
Well, I mean, we estimate we have over 3.5 to 4 million photos in the collection. We've digitized around 130,000. That leaves a lot of photos we haven't digitized.
Yeah.
However, the Herald is our biggest collection. It's about 2 million photos. But what you have to keep in mind is that the Herald had their own staff photographers, which make up a huge chunk of the collection. But they also got photos from wire services and from movie studios and from radio stations and from outside photographers. So those are all things that might, one, not necessarily be related to Los Angeles, and two, might have rights issues. Those are photos we actually would never digitize. We just digitize the photos taken by Herald photographers. So, 2 million photos in the Herald's a huge number. I would venture to guess like 40% of them are things that we don't have rights on, so we wouldn't digitize them. But again, we're always happy to check the offline collection when we're in the building.
I can't remember if you touched on it, but how did you come by the Herald-Examiner collection? How did that end up with the library?
Yeah, so the paper folded in 1989, and Glenn Creason, our map librarian, he had actually worked at the Herald in their library in the late 70s, and so he still had ties to them. And so I believe Glenn was the one who, kind of made that connection. I know there were other institutions around town that really were interested in obtaining the collection. And so finally the Herald decided to donate it to the library. Again, we didn't purchase it. It was a, total donation. And, and I think one of, we don't have money to purchase collections, but one of, I think, our biggest virtues is access, because we're a public library, we aim to just serve as huge a population as possible, and we don't require reader cards to do research with us. And so I think that was a big reason why the Hearst Corporation decided to turn the collection over to the library, was because of sheer availability.
Yeah, cool. Well, what else? So what other collections kind of stand out to you? And
yeah, well, certainly if we have our Shades of LA collection, which I hope people still know about that. And in the Shades of LA collection, that was something that came about. It's really the legacy project of my predecessor, Carolyn Kozo-Cole, who oversaw the photo collection for, I think, almost 20 years. And, she identified that it was an amazing collection, that really told a history of Los Angeles. It didn't necessarily tell a comprehensive history of Los Angeles. This has always been an incredibly culturally diverse city. And the photo collection at that time in the early 90s didn't necessarily reflect that. So she started Photo Friends, which is our nonprofit friends group that supports the photo collection, which fortunately is still around. And they launched Shades of LA. And what they did is between 1991 and I want to say all the way up to 1997, they would schedule photo days where they would go into different communities and invite people to bring their photos in. And we didn't expect people to actually give us their family photos. And 1991, this is before scanning existed. So a huge part of the budget for this project was to hire photographers to come in and make copy prints by photographing the photos.
So these are literally photos of photos. They
are photos of photos. So the physical collection, when you look at it, it is just a, relatively recent, within the last, almost 30 years, 25, 30 years. It's a print. There's no information on the back of the photo. So there's none of those notes that you get with original photos. They are just copy prints.
Yeah.
And so it was, wildly successful. I think we had somewhere around maybe 630 donors. It resulted in an archive of around 7,000 photos. And so it's been replicated around the country. The State Library did a Shades of California. So it was just an incredibly popular project that I think has, and I think in the current days of digitization, you see community projects like this more and more, such as like our Safer at Home archive that we've started, which invites people to contribute images amongst other things. So this was the first collection that we digitized back in 1998. So admittedly, the records aren't always as robust as they should be. So we try to beef them up when we can. But it is just an incredibly, significant collection, and images of kind of more working class neighborhoods are going to come from this collection. I think every photo we have relating to the Central Avenue jazz scene is from this collection. There's images of, what were once the segregated beaches are from this collection. So, so the Shades of LA project has just been, monumental in having the library's photo collection as a whole, hopefully reflect the city.
Yeah, this is an amazing collection, and it spans such a broad amount of time because it is people bringing in their old photos, obviously.
Yeah, so we have photos. Yeah, we have photos, of the Boyle Heights neighborhood, around the turn of the century. So yeah, it is a huge span of photos.
I'm just clicking on stuff that catches my eye here. I feel like this was on a recent Instagram post.
Was it?
I forget why.
Lots of photos of people with their cars. People love. Yeah, it's Los Angeles. People love their cars.
That's a very LA thing. Yeah, this post photo with the car, but
lots of those.
Or their rocket engine. What is this one? Oh, it's at the JPL. Wow. From 1948. Okay, cool. What else? What are the other collections? Let's talk about those.
Well, I have to talk about my beloved Valley Times collection briefly. Well, I guess I also need to talk about Security Pacific, because that's actually one of our other huge collections. So Security Pacific National Bank, the bank collected photos from the 1920s up until the late 70s. I guess for a variety of reasons. The bank was a strong advocate of local history, and they would publish historical pamphlets. They would publish maps. When they would open a community branch, they would use the branch. They would get photos of that community to reflect the history of it. I've also kind of pieced together, they had a gentleman working for the bank, Victor Plukas, and I feel like he was the driving force. And I think often that's, what you need with a collection is a driving force, such as with Shades of LA. That was Carolyn Cole, deciding this is something we're going to do. So I get the impression that, the bank had Victor Plukas. And so he was a driving force behind collecting photos. And so this ended up being a collection of around 150,000 photos, again, like reflecting the history of Los Angeles. Our really early photos from like the 1850s tend to be from this collection. It's a lot of real estate development photos. Just a lot of the really early photos of downtown and the plaza are in this collection. So it's really incredible. A lot of, the major commercial districts, a lot of downtown and a lot of Hollywood. And what I've been able to gather is that when he retired in the late 70s, I think the bank decided that was it. They were done with this collection. Yeah. And that's when the decision was made to donate it to us. And so from a physical standpoint, this was, the early 80s when we got this collection. There wasn't necessarily a lot of archival theory, at least at the library, might not have been available or had available to them. So over the years, a lot of donations we received were interfiled into the Security Pacific collection. So that's why when you're searching, because I see some photos coming up that are like in color that I can almost guarantee you are not from this collection. Got it. And so we've spent a number of years, going through the physical collection, pulling things out and trying to make it a little bit more original to what it was. So I think searching the online Security Pacific, you might see some questionable things, and that would be why. Just some kind of weird practices that happened,
That's interesting.
40 years ago. But one of the collections that came with Security Pacific was the Valley Times. And the Valley Times, I want to go back to the Valley Times, and that was a newspaper that ran in the San Fernando Valley from 1946. It ran until 1970 when it was forced to fold because the owner declared what was then the largest private bankruptcy in the country, and he had to fold this paper. Mm-hmm. So our actual collection, though, only dates to 1965. So it's from 46 to 65. I don't know where the last 5 years went. And this is it covers the entire San Fernando Valley in the post-war era when there was, just a huge amount of growth. People were moving out to the valley. You had like real estate booms. It's a period of a lot of social engagement, or a lot of civic engagement. So lots of social clubs. I think it's just, a wonderful collection. No story was too small for the Valley Times. So, they would cover the Democratic National Convention in 1960. But if grandma was celebrating her 82nd birthday and you called the paper, they had no problem sending a photographer out. So you just have, really small stories, which I think is, and this one right here, you just pulled up. This is George Brick. So he was actually one of the photographers at the Valley Times. And so he actually, sometimes photographers will show up in the photos. And a few years ago, I think in 2012, with Photo Friends, we launched a huge initiative to get the entire collection organized and digitized. So whereas the Herald-Examiner collection is, around 2 million photos, the Valley Times was maybe around 70,000. And we thought this is doable. Yeah. So with Photo Friends, we raised, I think, about $230,000 through fundraising and grants. We hired an archivist, Christine Adolph, and she worked on this collection for 3 years, completely organizing it. Mm-hmm. She selected, photos that staff photographers took. So there still are the wire service photos and the movies, those things we're not digitizing. And I think it ended up being around 42,000 photos that were selected for digitization. We've been working on it since around 2012 or 13, and we should be done completely digitizing this collection, hopefully by the end of the summer. So this is, so this has just been kind of my pet project over the years. And I just think it's wonderful. So I encourage people to look at our Valley Times collection.
I love that, no story too small.
Oh, not at all. My God, not at all. But it's just, and the other thing I'll say about the Valley Times photographers, they were, according to George Brick, they were the first photographers to switch over from 4x5 film to 35 millimeter, which resulted in really dynamic photos. And so you'll just see some, photo spreads or some series of photos in this collection that, I think would be worthy of Life magazine. And, George Brick went on to work for the Associated Press as a photographer for many years.
For somebody who's not a photographer, like what's the shift there with the technology? It's
so the 4x5 is large format, and it would take longer. So with 35, you're shooting things off much quicker. So you could catch faster action and more dynamic. There's George Brick again. We love George. George was he still is a handsome guy. They would frequently send George out to photograph like the women's social clubs. So I think they all responded well to George.
Nice. There's a lot of photos of, I guess this is George Brick's section.
Apparently, yeah. Lots of photos of George.
Loading, but okay, so that's the Valley Times collection.
Yeah.
I know that you had pulled up some stuff that you thought was cool. Do you want to let me bring up your screen and maybe we can take a look at some of your picks?
Yeah. So the thing I brought up are our 3 most ordered photos. And so the one we're seeing here is, I think it's LaGrande Station. No, it's Central Station. God, the train people are going to kill me. And this is local residents from Mexico that are being deported.
Wow.
Or, repatriated, as they called it at the time. And this was in 1932. And this is by far our most ordered photo. So I think
what is it being used for? Do you know?
This one's books, probably, I think, books and documentaries, because it's, just, an example of, that kind of, anti-immigrant sentiments and, deporting people. So, and it's just a really, great example of that. So this one, has been ordered quite a bit. The next one's a little bit lighter. It's, lighter, but possibly crueler. I don't know. So this is Bimbo, the surfing elephant. And
that's really an elephant surfing.
That is really an elephant surfing. I don't know if he's surf or water skiing. I guess more accurately water skiing. Yeah, I don't know if Bimbo actually enjoyed it or not, but this one has been ordered a lot. It seems to be ordered less than it used to be. So there is Bimbo.
Yeah.
This was one of our more recent photos by Cheryl Himmelstein. And if you can see if I can zoom in a little bit, the windshield of this photo has cats on it.
Nice.
And this one has been ordered so much. The California History Journal put it on the cover. This one gets ordered. People order it for prints to hang up in their home. So for some reason, the photo of the cats on the windshield of the van have really resonated with people.
Universal. So it's a beautiful photograph.
It is a beautiful photograph.
Cheryl Himmelstein. I've looked at her photos before.
Yeah. So Cheryl was one of the photographers for our Neighborhoods project. And so this was a project that was done in the early 2000s. And again, by Carolyn working with Photo Friends, where photographers were hired to photograph different neighborhoods around the city. And so Cheryl was assigned the Venice neighborhood. And so you'll see her photos there. You'll also see Cheryl was involved with another project around 2008, 2009, right around the time I came on. There was an industrial project, and that was a similar project where professional photographers were hired to document industry around the city, just because industry has always really been an important part of Los Angeles history. And so Cheryl documented the garment district. And so those are the 2 sets of photos you'll see from Cheryl. Will be Venice and the garment district from those 2 distinct projects.
That's so cool.
So those are our 3 most popular. And then I brought up just some of my personal favorite. So this is just a little girl at a pet show in Venice, I think in the 20s. And I just think it's just a feel-good photo. She's just so very sweet. And I think this one was used on a postcard back in the 80s, and somebody hand-tinted it. And then...
What is she holding? Sorry, I couldn't see. What was she holding?
She's holding a frog, a toad.
Okay.
She is holding a toad, yeah. She brought her toad to the Venice Pet Show.
Those are kind of those glasses are kind of chic right now.
They are. My daughter has some. They're very Harry Potter. My daughter has similar ones. here's one of our Valley Times photos, and it's just fun. So it's all of these kids. So this is a family. They're all siblings, and they're all going into the hospital to have their tonsils taken out. And so this is the last photo of their tonsils, and this is also George Brick. You know, when you work with these collections, you really get to know the style of these photographers. So at this point, I can usually spot a George Brick photo from a mile away. He has a very distinct style.
Wow. And obviously you were saying he's kind of a charismatic guy. I mean, to photograph people like that and kind of, I don't know, connect with them like that, it really takes a personality, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely does. Yeah, George, also for AP, he was on the set of the Star Wars holiday special. And he sent photos from that. He has no, I asked him about, because I'm a Star Wars fanatic, and I asked him, he's like, I have no memory of doing that. So wow. The Star Wars holiday special made very little impression on George. Here's, this is one of my favorite photos from the Shades of LA collection. This is a family, I believe this is the Lishy family, and they're in the Watts neighborhood. And I just love the juxtaposition of the two daughters on each side. So you have the daughter on the left-hand side who's just very, very prim and proper, and has the bow perfectly in the back of her head, and the very high-necked dress, and she has brought her violin for the portrait. And then you have the other daughter on the other side who just really doesn't want to be there, and who just looks like she's about to go conquer the world. And I think Dad looks pretty bewildered. So I think this photo just says so much about family dynamics.
Yeah, and it's beautifully composed too. The symmetry is really cool.
Yeah. Well, and just, and having a family portrait taken, outside of the home rather than in a studio. I just think it's just a wonderful, wonderful photo. And again, Shades of LA, like we would never have a photo like this in our collection if it hadn't been for Shades. Here's, I have to throw in Anne Dvorak. So she's my favorite actress. And I've been collecting on her for a number of years, and I wrote a book on her a few years back. And this is just one of my, I think, favorite photos of her. She just looks like a movie star from head to toe in this photo, but she's actually in court suing Warner Brothers to get out of her contract. So this isn't a movie studio photo. It's a Herald-Examiner photo. And it just speaks to the kind of photography you often see in the Herald-Examiner, especially, in the 20s and 30s, when they just loved, sensation. And if a movie star was in court, the Herald was there. We actually did an entire exhibit a few years back that was all movie stars in court, because the Herald always covered the stars in court. But I just love what an incredibly dramatic photo this is. And then, working with the photo collection, and I would like to think that searching the photo collection, you make a lot of discoveries, and you learn a lot about the history of the city that you might not have otherwise. And this is a photo of an architect named Lucille Rapport. And she actually studied under Neutra. And, what was it? I think a little bit of a name in architecture here in Los Angeles. I think she's becoming a little bit more well-known now. And so she did residential and architecture mid-century, residential and commercial mid-century architecture. I had never heard of her. And so when I was early on processing the Valley Times collection, I came across her. And at some point, somewhere on our website, there's a blog post that I did on her where I tried to hunt down as many of her buildings as I could. And she's somebody I don't know that I would be aware of had I not come across her in the photo collection. And then here's just another example of, discovery in the photo collection. This is another Valley Times photo. And so this is this gentleman. I think he's either the architect of the apartment building or the artist. I don't remember. Let me take a look. I think he might be the artist. And this is just this wild, wonderful mural that went on an apartment building, and it's still there. So if you can do like a Google Street View, or if you want to, go for a ride, this building is still there, and this mural is still there. And I don't know, even though I live in the Valley, I don't know if I ever would have come across this building had it not been for our photo collection. So those are just kind of a couple of examples of just sheer, discovery through the photo collection. And then, so for those of us that work with the photo collection, we become very attached to the photographers. So, in some cases, like with George Brick, we've actually, got to meet him and we've got to know him. Over the years, we've gotten to know some of the Herald-Examiner photographers. And so when we do exhibits with Herald photos, they'll come. So we've gotten to know them and we feel very fortunate. But in a lot of other cases, the photographers aren't around anymore. And so the only way we really get to know them is through their photos. But often they show up in the collections. And so this is a photo of Hermann Schultheis and his wife, Ethel. And Hermann was a German immigrant who came to the United States in the late 20s and then came to New York, met Ethel, who lived in New Jersey. And then they came here in the late 30s. And he worked at Disney briefly in the late 30s, early 40s. And in his spare time, he was an amateur photographer. And him and Ethel just went all around the city, like between 1937 and 1941. And I think we have around 6,000 photos of Los Angeles during that time period. And so we ended up with his archive, and all of his photos of Los Angeles have been digitized. And, he would go to areas of the city, he might go down, instead of being in, like the financial district, he might go down to the area that's, like around 5th and Main, that's now Skid Row. And a lot of, that area, was never, particularly hoity-toity. So photographers really didn't go down there. And so he would take, photos of that area. He would go, out to the valley before it was really developed. So it's a really interesting archive. But there's also just lots of photos of Ethel. So him and Ethel clearly had a wonderful relationship. And this is a photo, they're at the racetrack. And I'm assuming it's a selfie. I think he had turned the camera around. And so it's just nice when we get to actually meet our photographers. Here's another example of photographers in our collection. This is Roland Curtis. And he was a photographer. We believe he was a field deputy for Tom Bradley when he was a council person in the 60s, as well as Billy Mills, who was another council person. And so we have this incredible archive, and it's all 4x5 negatives. So it's an archive of city politics, particularly in the South Central area in the 1960s. And that's a collection that we are slowly starting to get online. So hopefully once Valley Times is done, you'll start seeing more of Roland Curtis's photos online. But this is just a wonderful photo of Roland Curtis and his mother, on an airplane ride. Nice. I love that she has a corsage for her, because riding an airplane was such a special thing at one time. That
people used to really dress up for it.
I remember, my first airplane ride was in the mid 80s when I was a kid, and I had to dress up for it. Like I had to wear a dress and tights. My grandmother made me dress up for the airplane ride. So even as recent as the 80s, we were dressing up nice. So
there's sweatpants, tracksuit.
Yeah, no. And then this is one of my other absolute favorite photos in the entire collection. This is from our Lasky Wilshire Slides photo collection. And Anne Lasky, she used to work at the Conservancy, and I used to volunteer there as a docent for one of their walking tours. So I got to know Annie pretty well. And when Annie was 15 in the late 70s, she and her mom, who was, I believe, like an architectural historian, photographed Wilshire Boulevard from downtown to Santa Monica. So they photographed the entire expanse of Wilshire Boulevard. It took them, a few months. So I think every week they would go and just, shoot a block or so, all in Kodachrome. So all Kodachrome slides. So I think that's around 1,000 photos. Those are all online. But this is the one photo of the two of them, and her mom, Marlene, has passed away. So I just love that we have a photo of Annie and Marlene in the collection. And, it's so funny when Annie came to me a few years back and said, I have like 1,000 photos of Wilshire Boulevard in the 70s. I don't know. Do you want those? Like, oh, I couldn't, take them from her quick enough. So that's just an incredible collection of photos. And then here's one last one. Here's Harry Quillin. And he was primarily a circus photographer. So he shot circuses. I don't know if he traveled with the Clyde Beatty Circus. But he also, for some reason, extensively photographed Chinatown and China City. I think from the 20s, Chinatown from the 20s, I think all the way, I want to say through the 50s. And his archive ended up at a circus museum I want to say maybe in Wisconsin. And so the Circus Museum, gets his archive of circus photos, but then there's a whole bunch of Chinatown and China City photos. And so they sent them to us.
Mhm.
And my first exposure to the photo archive was as an intern. In 2004, when I was getting my library degree, I interned with Carolyn, and this was right around the time we had received this collection, the Harry Quillin collection. And so one of the things we did is we went to the Chinatown branch and brought a bunch of these photos of people. And the Chinatown is, it's a very close community, and people have lived there for generations. And so we invited all of these local residents, and they came and just poured over the photos. And so a lot of things were identified because we did that. But at the same time, it's always nice when we get to see the actual photographer for some reason holding a bear cub. And there's Harry Quillin.
That's amazing.
So there's just a small. Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking about Los Angeles photographers about Gary Leonard.
Yes.
So Gary Leonard is, well, tell us about Gary Leonard.
Oh, Gary somehow manages to, I think, divide himself into 50 different Gary Leonards because he photographs every corner of this city all the time. Gary is just a great friend of the Los Angeles Public Library, and he's been shooting the city, since the 70s. He shot a lot of the punk scene in the 70s. Now he just kind of shoots everything. He's donated, I think, around 2,500 photos or so to us. He constantly donates things. So we do have a lot of his club photos, photos just of events around town. So when Echo Park was being rehabilitated, he photographed that extensively. Just kind of things he feels that we should, that should be represented in the collection. He is so generous. We've actually, the library actually hires him for events, to cover events a lot of the time.
That's what I was going to say, because when I first met Gary, I was working at Central and I just saw him at events photographing, and I didn't realize at that time that he had this incredible history of photographing Los Angeles going back to the 70s. And started looking into it, and I was like, oh, that guy's got some interesting stuff under his,
Oh, he has so much. He's able to, anytime, our photo collection doesn't always have everything. So sometimes, if we're missing a photo, I'll contact him. A few years back, we did an exhibit on the local music scene, primarily using Herald photos. It was the music scene in the 1980s. And I felt that we couldn't have the music scene without a photo of Motley Crue. There were no photos of Motley Crue in the Herald. And so I went to Gary and said, Gary, do you have any photos of Motley Crue? And he says, if you can figure out a date. And I was a huge Motley Crue fan in the 80s. So I was able to work with Gary. I found the date. I'm like, I think this is the date that photo was taken. And he found it. And now we have just one of the most fantastic photos of Shout at the Devil era Motley Crue in the photo collection. So our exhibit could go on.
He's got a lot of photos from the 92 riots here.
The riots. Yeah, I think most of our, if not all of our photos from the 92 riots are because of him, because again, the Herald-Examiner folded in 1989. So a lot of the big news events that happened after that, the Herald wasn't around. So the riots, there's photos of the O.J. Simpson trial. Those came from Gary Leonard. I'm hoping that maybe photos of, just kind of Los Angeles during this time period, maybe we'll see, but Gary even, has shown up every year. My daughter's a Girl Scout. And so at my house, we have a cookie party. So to get everybody to come buy cookies from her. And the last 2 years, Gary has come to document the cookie party, has donated those photos to the library. And the last probably about year and a half, we've actually hired Gary to photograph all of our branches. And so he's been going in and doing just really great surveys of all of our branches because, we have a historic photo collection. So we have a lot of old photos of our branches and a lot of buildings that aren't there anymore. But after the 1998 bond measure, we built a lot of new branches that aren't necessarily represented in the collection. So Gary's gone, and Gary always wanted to go to every branch. That was always a goal of his, was to visit every branch. And so he's not quite done with it. I think he was almost done. And so those are photos that we'll hopefully see going online soon. And that branch photo collection is going to be our first foray into born digital photos. So now everything you see online we do have a physical object in the library. So we do have a print, or a negative or a slide or a glass plate, because it is a physical photo collection. People often will, want to just, contact me and like donate a photo they took on their phone. And because it's an actual archival collection, we don't do that, but we have the Safe Art Home archive for that now. So we haven't really gotten into born digital, which, can be a little bit intimidating, because you want to know, like, what are the specs for the photos that you're accepting? And, because people order photos from us that maybe they do want to blow up and stick on a billboard, we want to make sure that we have a quality of file that can accommodate that. So, so Gary's branch photos are our first born digital. So we'll see how that goes.
You had mentioned the Photo Friends. Maybe I'll bring up, let's see, is there a link off of Tessa to that, or?
It's photofriends.org is the website. Yeah, I don't know that. I think I don't know if we've updated that lately, but Photo Friends is, Photo Friends is absolutely.
We got a comment about how there's a book about, I think when we were talking about Annie, and I know that you have many books available.
Many books. So yeah, publishing is something that Photo Friends has gotten into the last few years. I think our book on Herman Schulteis's photos from the 30s, I think that was in 2012. So since then, gosh, I think we've published around like 15 books or so. And it's just been a really great way to highlight the collection and curate the photos, because, it's great to have Tessa, and it's great to be able to look through the photos online because they're right at your fingertips. They're available anytime. But rooting through 130,000 photos, I think, can sometimes be challenging, especially if you maybe don't have a really targeted search in mind. And so by publishing these books, which some of them you can order from the library store. I think they're doing online orders again. All of them are available through Amazon, and you can do a search. I think it's Photo Friends Publications is what you can search for on Amazon. And we've just done books. They've just kind of run the gamut. So you can see we have one here on Neon that one was written by Eric Linksweiler, who's on our Photo Friends board, and he is one of the tour guides of the Neon cruises. And so there's how you can order that. We have one, Landmarks Lost and Almost Lost. And that's all, architecture. And that was written by Cindy Olnick, who's on our Photo Friends board. And for a number of years, she worked at the Los Angeles Conservancy. So that was an area that, that was her area of expertise. We have the first with the latest about Aggie Underwood, who was the city desk editor at the Herald for a number of years. And that was written by Joan Renner, who, Joan, if you're listening, I hope you're writing that total biography on Aggie. So, Photo Friends, they're just an incredible group of people. Amy Inouye is our president. She's also a book designer by trade, which is why our books look so good. So I've just been so fortunate to have, just so many like talented people with different passions. So we have a book on baseball, which is a number of different essays, and that was put together by David Davis, and he's a sports journalist, and he is written, he's about to release, I think, his third or fourth book, which is related to wheelchair basketball. So I am just so fortunate that people that are really, experts in certain areas and just have passion for certain areas have, donated their expertise and their time and their talents to Photo Friends. And when these books are sold, the proceeds go to Photo Friends, which in turn helps the photo collection.
Yeah. I thought, one thing we could talk about really briefly, I know that we briefly talked about how people do order these. Could you explain how people can order photographs? Yeah,
so there is a link. If you go to the main photo page on Tessa, there is a link for ordering photos, ordering in use.
Yeah, so right? You would go to the photo collection within Tessa and then click on ordering in use. And then click on
ordering in use. And then there's all of the instructions and the fee schedule. And there is a form that you can fill out and email. And I will say, if anybody's going to order right now, when we're in quarantine, we're handling payment a little bit different. So you do not need to put your credit card information. So don't do that right now. And then, so right now, we are limited to, because I'm doing this from home, we're limited to existing files on our servers. So in all cases, we will have a 300 DPI 8x10 TIFF. And in most cases, we'll have up to 600 DPI. So resolutions higher than that, unfortunately, we can't accommodate right now because we can't pull the photo to rescan it because I wasn't able to bring 3 million photos home with me. And we're not able to accommodate actual prints because we do make in-house, like beautiful, in-house digital prints. We're not able to accommodate printing right now.
Right.
But, you can, I don't know if there are other local printers or, other online options for ordering prints. You can always get the higher resolution file from us and then have it printed elsewhere if it's something that you need right now. But we're still doing that. We're still able to turn those around, and we're actually turning things around much quicker than we usually do. So that's maybe one silver lining for folks.
Your department, we were talking about this before, is one of the departments of the library that kind of, it's a little easier for you to pivot to working from home, and because you're so digital already. I mean, so much of your work is done with a computer, and except you can't access the physical holdings.
You can't access the physical, but I even have a couple of staff members who, they're working with collections of negatives and slides. So they were actually, because that's, a fairly compact format, they were able to take work home with them. So we're actually still processing physical collections right now. Wendy Horowitz, who's my librarian on staff, she's been processing a collection of a photographer named Richard Hewitt. And this was a collection we just got, I think we got it maybe in October or November. And Hewitt was a photographer. This collection runs from the 50s until I think up to the 1990s. And he shot for Life magazine and for Look magazine. He shot extensively for TV Guide. And so this is a combination of those Kodachrome slides. So there's color photos on the set of the Andy Griffith show is here. There's I think like the no, I don't know if he did the MASH finale. There's some show called Salvage One with Andy Griffith and the Dad on Silver Spoons, which I'd never heard of. And we have like this extensive collection of like table readings for the Salvage One TV show, which was like Sanford and Son in space. So again, learning a lot from our photo collection. This is, the Sunny and Cher show. It's just, I think it's going to be an incredibly significant collection that people are going to really flip out over. And over on the photo Twitter account, we've been posting a sneak preview of some of those photos. But that's something Wendy has been working on. Like, she has the photos. Her kitchen table is her workspace. And, even though we're not in the building, she's been able to continue with that. So, so we have been able to continue processing some physical collections, but at the same time, turning a lot of our attention to getting more photos online because that's, such a core service now. When we started digitizing photos in 1998, I think it was a really cool kind of flashy vanity project, but now people expect it. So that's definitely a goal of ours.
And I think it's an interesting point that, many people outside of our field maybe don't realize that, it's not just about physically scanning the things. It's about creating that metadata and that description that allows you to actually search for it and access it. And that's kind of the bigger task ultimately is that description.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like I said, I think we have a backlog of maybe 20,000 photos that have been scanned. And so scanning is this much of the operation. Somewhere I have a flow chart that I made, which shows like the 30 steps of digitizing a photo, and, scanning is just one box of it. Yeah. But there's, on our end in the photo collection, we prep the photos and try to do the research and try to gather as much information as we can before we turn it over to the digitization department. And then the metadata librarian, has to, go through with what we've provided, determine that it's enough, but then they're also, creating a description and assigning subject headings because we want the metadata to be incredibly useful, and we want the metadata to kind of transfer over to other photos in the collection that are similar. So we use subject headings so that you can click on, a subject heading and get, every photo that we have on a particular subject, ideally.
So Tim was asking what the Twitter account was. I think I had it's /LAPL photos.
Yeah, for Twitter, it's at LAPL photos.
Well, let me pop that up on the screen here.
And then for Facebook, it's photos LAPL. but that kind of looks like photo slap. So we for Twitter, we went with LAPL photos.
Photo slap.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to Cy Gutierrez, who's on my staff, and he's the one. I don't handle the social media, so I let Cy do that, and I think he's just been doing an amazing job. He's always done the social media for the last couple of years, but I think while we've been in quarantine, oh my gosh, click on that photo of the cat wedding. That's one of my other favorite photos that I actually didn't bring up.
Oh my God!
So this is a Herald photo of a cat wedding in the 80s, and a few years back, we did a program at Central Library with, I think we had 10 photographers from the Herald-Examiner. And so Rob Brown, James Rubsman, who is the photographer of this one, he brought it up at, each photographer selected a handful of photos they wanted to talk about. And he brought this one up and he said, this is not a good photo. Like, it's not framed well. There's nothing special about it. It just really encapsulates what it was like to work for the Herald. So, you might be covering the Academy Awards. You might be hopping in a helicopter to cover an earthquake in Mexico City. You might be covering a cat wedding. So that just always, stands out that, as a photographer for these newspapers, you just never know what your assignment was going to be.
I love that this altar here is cat scale, even though it's human.
Scale. Yeah. But that's another one of my favorite photos. But yeah, but Cy has just been absolutely
he's
wonderful.
posting every day. Really cool stuff.
Yeah. And there's one of the Sunny and Cher photos from the Hewitt collection.
Oh, cool.
There's that one.
And like you were saying, I mean, the collection's so expansive that sometimes it's fun to have a little bit of curation, either with the books or somebody, who knows the collection.
Yeah.
So this is just a cool way to see some of the highlights if you use Twitter, definitely follow them.
Yeah. And there's a film strip. So one of our girls, Valeria, she's been logging Herald negatives, because we actually have the 35 millimeter negatives from the Herald for the last 10 years. So from 79 to 89, we don't have earlier ones. And so I think that's a photo of Chuck E. Cheese. And so she's been going, and she's fun. She's in her 20s, so she kind of knows nothing about the 80s. And by the end of this project of going through these Herald negatives, she's going to be our resident expert on the 1980s, whether she wants it or not.
Concerts. Cool.
And I see somebody asking about an upcoming exhibit or lecture, Tim.
Yeah.
If you scroll up on the Twitter, there's a photo of Marilyn and Jane. And so on June 3rd, we're actually, there they are. On June 3rd, we're actually going to be doing our first virtual program. So we have an ongoing program called The Photographer's Eye, where we invite photographers or collection managers to come and talk about photos. And so Christy McAvoy is going to be talking about the Hollywood photo collection. And so that will be our first virtual. So we will see how that goes. And it will. Yes, it will be right here on YouTube and on Facebook. And then we have one of my personal heartbreaks about having to shut down the library is that we actually have an exhibit called Life on a String, the Yale Puppeteers and the Turnabout Theater. And that is an exhibit that was supposed to have opened on April 2nd in our Getty Gallery. And that is a collection, our Turnabout Theater collection, which is also in Tessa. Right now, it's in an InMagic database, but we're in the process of moving it over onto Content DM, which is the platform that hosts most of our collections. So the Turnabout Theater / Yale Puppeteers archive is going to be much more accessible in the very near future. But these were three gentlemen who were puppeteers, and they operated a puppet / live entertainment venue on La Cienega from 1941 to 56. But their career, they were together as a trio from the 20s up until the last one passed away, I think, Foreman Brown in 1996. And so this is an exhibit I've been working on for about 3 years, and it was in the process of being installed. It was supposed to have opened. So I don't know when it's going to open now, but we're hoping to have an online component to kind of highlight that collection, and that should be coming very soon. But we also have a catalog for it that's up on Amazon for sale right now that Photo Friends put together. So that was our big exhibit that maybe one day, hopefully people will be able to come to Central Library and see it. I just don't know when.
Wow. Yeah, that's a shame. But
Tim, I love Amy too. Amy Inoue is the best.
well, actually, it looks like we are basically out of time. It's 1 o'clock. We've been on here for an hour. I want to say thank you to you, Christina. If somebody wanted to get in touch and like had a question about the photo collection, is there a way to contact, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, they can email us at photos, PHOTOS at lapl.org.
Okay.
And that right now is the best way to get in contact with us if you have questions. But yeah, if you have questions about ordering photos or searching for photos online, again, unfortunately, I can't look for offline photos right now because we're at home. If there's things you're looking for that you don't see in the collection, kind of keep it at the back of your mind. And once we're back in our buildings, you can always get in contact with us. But in the meantime, just dive into Tessa and lose, I think you can lose, guarantee at least 2 hours of your life instantly. And probably many more going down the many rabbit holes of the online photo collection.
For sure, yeah. Tessa is amazing. If you're joining us late, that's the URL. So that's tessa.lapl.org. It's our main sort of hub for our digital collections, part of our website. But yeah, definitely check it out. Amazing stuff up there. So cool talking to you, Christina. I guess we can probably sign off.
Okay.
So I want to say thanks for joining us today on Ask a Librarian Live. And I hope everyone is still staying safe, still, maintaining sanity out there. And we miss everyone. We are, of course, still working, still trying to help people out with digital resources. Check out our website, lapl.org. We've got amazing digital resources. You can read books, watch movies, everything for free, get access to magazines, newspapers, free online courses, all kinds of stuff. So check out the website for sure. If you need something to do or need something, you can also contact us at the Ask a Librarian page that's on our website. There are librarians that are working that will answer your emails. So do take advantage of that service. We did have a few questions. We do not have an official timetable for reopening the library or offering physical access to materials, but we are working on that. We've got people, planning out what that process will look like and, what the milestones we would have to achieve to begin to operate again in some capacity. But in the meantime, we are, trying our best to offer as many digital resources as we can. And that's about it for today. So thanks so much. And we'll see you next Friday.
Thank you. Bye.